Welcome back to Dating History, where every episode we break down a historical male figure and talk through his personality, his dating habits, his relationship patterns, and discuss what he would be like in the modern dating scene and what he was like back then. This week, our unlucky guy. Tell us about him, Analisa.
This week, we're going to break down Mr. Benjamin Franklin, one of our founding fathers. Benjamin Franklin was an inventor, a diplomat, alleged womanizer, and I think the kind of guy that would send you a really long email about self-improvement and then break up with you.
Right. You'd be like, here are all the ways you hurt my feelings. And he'd be like, here are the steps you should take so that you feel better because I hurt your feelings.
We all need to work on ourselves to do that kind of thing.
Benjamin Franklin was born on January 17th, 1706. He actually technically originally had a different birthday, but then England switched calendars. Is that? Capricorn, which makes so much sense. It makes perfect sense. He is the Capricorn. For anyone who doesn't know, Capricorns are known for being diligent, quite interested in money and longevity and working really hard. And Benjamin Franklin was obsessed with all of those things, as we are about to discuss. He was born and raised in Boston, like many great people are.
And go Celtics.
He was the youngest son of a youngest son, going back 5 generations, which means that he was the baby boy of his family. And if you are dating a guy and he has a lot of older siblings and he is the youngest boy, all I can say is like, be careful.
How many siblings did he have?
He had 16 siblings.
He had 16 siblings.
His dad had 17 children over a period of 34 years, but not all of them
what a guy
lived. Yeah, he was at it. Obviously, that was not with only one woman. Of course not, because he had multiple wives.
He was a total player.
The biography that I read also made a point of noting that lots of men got remarried because women just kept dying. And I was like, totally. Benjamin Franklin is famous for inventing a lot of things. He also ended up being sort of like the father figure of the founding fathers, but that was really in like the sunset of his life. Before that, he was a printmaker. He was an inventor of a lot of things that we still use today, like lightning rod, bifocals.
A glass harmonica?
Oh, why? Yeah, where it used like, you know, when like your older sibling at a party like goes like on glasses.
That's what he was doing?
Yeah, it was like it played glasses.
Okay.
And also he set up the first American lending library, volunteer fireman corps, and U.S. Postal Service. So that's why people love him. But then today we're going to talk about why he would have been a horrible boyfriend.
I think he would have been a boyfriend that you don't miss that much, but you bring up as an example of a bad boyfriend. Like, do you remember that fucking guy? I think I would be embarrassed if I dated him.
Well, we'll get into that more. So he had no formal education, really, and he started work when he was 12. He started working in his older brother's print shop. His older brother printed newspapers, among other things, and so he became apprenticed by him. But he didn't necessarily love having a boss and probably didn't love having his older brother be that boss.
So he started his own.
He started his own. Before he ran away from his brother's company, he started writing an anonymous column, which he pretended it wasn't him by slipping it under the door. That was written from the perspective of like a middle-aged woman.
His fake identity was a middle-aged woman, and what was the name of it?
Silence Do Good.
Silence Do Good.
She would give like advice or like, you know, say you ruminate about various things happening in town. And he was probably like 15, 16 at the time.
That's the most youngest son thing I've ever heard.
He was kind of like the original like Onion article writer or like Reductress article writer that he wrote satirical headlines. And I just think that it's important to note that like he never identified himself as a comedian, but like he technically was doing comedic writing. And then I would also, this episode is just me issuing warnings to women all the time, but I would also issue
another reason why we wouldn't date him.
Yeah, don't date male comedians. There, I said it. He wasn't really a comedian, but he was like kind of a comedian. Anyway,
he invented a lot of different things, and the haircut.
And a haircut?
He invented the hairstyle that no one ever did again. It's long hair but half bald.
He wouldn't wear a wig is part of what you're talking about.
Which is fine, but if you're going to be half bald, just shave the whole thing or cut it.
He was kind of like the original comb-over guy who was like, no, it's working.
No, I can guarantee no one has ever rocked that hairstyle ever again.
After he worked for his brother, he ran away to New York very briefly and then to Philadelphia, go Birds, and he started eventually his own print shop. Ben, as a young man, was known for having a big sexual appetite. He wrote about sex a fair amount, which we'll get into. He wrote an article that was called Advice to a Young Man on His Choice of a Mistress, something like that. And he took up with many women, some of whom were professional women of the street. He also tried to woo. He was probably like, late teens, early 20s. He tried to woo his landlady's daughter, Deborah, because she seemed so like sturdy and reliable. But this brings me to the point that Ben Franklin was the original, like, is she wife material or girlfriend material with women? Because he was like, oh, I'm going to hook up with prostitutes, but then this lady is so frugal and so reliable, she'll be the one I'll marry. And he was very frugal. Right. More on that. On him being frugal.
I think that Ben Franklin would be the type of guy that you would have to split the bill with because he's a feminist. It's not happening.
And he'd be like, it's a compliment.
That's the only thing that has progressed this far in terms of feminism. We still get paid less. We still get harassed in the street, but we sometimes have to pay.
Have you had to pay on a date? Because I really don't think there have been many dates where someone has asked.
If you live in Silver Lake and you date creative guys and artists and broke guys per se, I think they'll write it off as like a feminist thing. At this point, like the only guy that will guarantee definitely always pay is a Republican. Republicans are the only ones that pay.
I don't think I've ever had a guy really try to split.
You might be dating secret closeted Republicans.
But part of what we're circling around with Ben Franklin is that he was like very big on rules of life, including saving money, not being like too showy. And also he was very big in writing rules for himself and then rules for other people, which is why he was kind of like the original self-help guys, that he would write rules for like how people should be and rules for a good life and rules for like doing things well. And I understand why that's helpful. But I also think that like because he was so frugal, I think he would be the type of guy that's like doesn't want to pay for your manicures as a treat to you, but then like loves the look of like acrylics on another woman.
Like this guy, if you poured a Hailey Bieber smoothie out of the Erewhon cup and you put it in a regular cup and gave it to him, he'd say it's the best thing he's ever had in his life.
100%.
But he will absolutely make fun of people for going to Erewhon.
I also think that he would be the guy that's like gives you a hard time for watching a reality show and then stands in the doorway and like watches the whole episode and then has thoughts on it later. So he's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're watching this shit. And then he's like, it's actually crazy what she did to that other guy. Like that would be him.
But his thoughts are highbrow.
Right.
Because he thinks he's smarter than everyone in the show and he thinks someone who would be in a reality show is dumb, which is absolutely proven to be false.
So young Ben Franklin went to Philadelphia, tried to court his landlady's daughter, Deborah, then went over to London and worked at a print shop there, then came back, tried again with the landlady's daughter, who had now been married once, but it was presumed that her husband was dead. However, you could get in a lot of trouble for marrying someone who was already married. So they took up a common law marriage and they never got officially married, which is like kind of bananas. They got
he's a guy who didn't believe in marriage.
He did believe in marriage, but he didn't want to get in trouble with the law around it. But it did mean for her, I'm presuming, no ring and no dress. So in 1730, they began living together as a married couple. He would be like 24 at that time. Can you imagine moving in together at 24? Crazy.
I've done that.
I guess the Mormons are like, yeah. But what's insane about this is she moved in with him. They get common law married. And then, surprise, he's a dad. This, I feel like, is never talked about with Ben Franklin. Single father going into that marriage. He had a relationship with who? You guessed it, a woman of the night. And he had a bastard son. And he moved in not only with his new wife, but now he was like, surprise, you get an infant on top of everything else. The thing about Ben Franklin is he had William out of wedlock, then William, his son, then he had a child out of wedlock, and then that son also had a child out of wedlock. So cool guys, those Franklin dudes.
It's a family tradition.
It's a family tradition. A couple years into their marriage, she gave birth to a boy. She had her stepson, and then now she also gave birth. And Ben Franklin was very, very pro-inoculation, very pro-vaccination against smallpox, but they delayed it for their son, and because he was sick with something else. And then he died of smallpox right after his 4th birthday. Isn't that tragic?
That's so sad. That's for the anti-vaxxers.
Yeah. So vaccinate your kids against smallpox, everybody. He was technically married to Deborah for, I think it was 44 years. Yeah, 44-year marriage until she died. But that did not stop him from flirting.
Yeah, it was a loveless marriage. I think he was just with her for comfort, and because you couldn't really get divorced that easily.
I also think that he really liked the idea of having a domestic partner who kept designing the house while he was gone, but he kept flirting with other people, which would be Ben Franklin. It's the modern day equivalent of finding out that your boyfriend is texting 6 other girls, and he's like, we're just texting, and you're like, yeah, but you're sending each other music.
Yeah, he had a lot of female friends,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes some people would argue that men and women can't be friends.
Would you argue that?
Some people would argue that. It depends. I genuinely think it depends. I think men and women can be friends under certain circumstances. If one of them's in a relationship, if both of them are in a relationship, if one of them is ugly.
Analisa, we can't say that.
Okay, if somebody is not attracted to the other person, and then obviously if one of them's gay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if there's a male-female relationship and they're both attractive
mm-hmm.
and they spend a lot of time with each other, it's always questionable.
Yeah, I disagree, but I do think that in the case of him, he was definitely flirting up a storm in a way that's not giving platonic friend.
No, yeah. He had definite romantic emotional affairs.
100%. He also did the thing where he would tell his wife about his friendships with the women and tell the women about his wife in a kind of it's all fine because I'm reporting everything to everybody, but
What did his letter to young men say again?
His letter to young men on their choice of a mistress.
He was advising young men to date only older women because they have more experience.
It is written, to be clear, as a humorous piece. However, advice to a friend on choosing a mistress. He tells young guys that if they are going to hook up with somebody, they should do so with an older woman. He was saying that you should do this because she won't get pregnant. I guess, fair point. And then also they're more subtle. They've had more experience having sex. And then it's less of a sinful act because she's not a virgin. She's already had sex. So you're not the one who's deflowering her. And then also because they'd be so grateful.
So do you think that's sarcastic? I very much feel like he could have written that as satire.
Yeah, I think he wrote it as satire, but then
he did mean parts of it.
His grandson, when his papers were being released, obviously did not want that article to go anywhere because it makes him look, even as a joke, kind of a pain in the ass.
And let's be clear, by older women, he meant 33.
Well, I don't know. Would women at that time have already been going through menopause? Because if there's no chance to have a child.
He meant menopausal?
Yeah, because then he says then she won't get pregnant.
Were women going through menopause at 33 back then?
He's going for the MILFs. Maybe. He's saying if you're going to do it, you might as well really do it.
Date a woman in her 50s?
I guess so.
I should hope so.
The interesting thing, I think one of the things that people think of the most when they think of Ben Franklin is the key and the kite thing, the kite experiment, in which he proved that the lightning that you see in the sky is a form of electricity. One thing I didn't realize when I learned about that from my revolutionary cartoons when I was a child is that he asked his son to help him with the experiment, partially by flying the kite that had a metal wire attached to it and a key at the bottom. So he set his son up to be electrified.
That sounds like something your dumb brother would have to do.
I know.
Oh, dude, go get in this tire. I'm going to push you down the hill. I'm going to film the whole thing. It's going to be sick. It's like a big brother. He was a dumbass.
Except that it was his kid. He was like, yeah, just fly the kite, just fly the kite. He got stressed because he didn't think it was working, and so then eventually he took the kite and he rubbed his own knuckle against the key, and it drew sparks, which is cool. There was electricity, but he could have died by doing that.
Wow, great job.
That was the thing.
Left your
He
child fatherless.
rode the clout from that key experiment all the way to England and France. That was when he got there. They were like, this guy is the sickest because of that one experiment.
The kite thing is, I think, yes, he's a genius, I guess, but he's also incredibly childish in his behavior. Mm-hmm. He has an insane brain, absolutely a genius man, crazy mind, but he was a child about it. I think a lot of guys fit into this category of either a guy, a boy, or a man, as adults even. And I think he was a boy.
I kind of agree because he kept doing like, what's going to happen if I do this? That was like his thing for the rest of his life.
He had a lot of trial and error. He picked things up and he let them go.
What does that mean?
He had new hobbies all the time. You know, He was 1 minute, he was just negotiating a peace treaty, and the next he was writing, like publishing a journal, and then inventing a glass harmonica. Like he was always doing something new, and he proved to be a genius in many different ways, which is cool, you know, jack of all trades kind of thing. But at the same time, it was very childish the way he went about it. You always wonder how somebody invents something or discovers something, and he was doing dumb shit, making his kid.
The answer is, making your small child run around to maybe get struck by a lightning bolt.
Exactly.
He started getting honorary degrees because of his like science experiments when he was in his 40s. So he got an honorary degree from Harvard and Yale, and then he got an honorary doctorate from St. Andrews. And then he and other people, but started referring to himself as the doctor.
Oh, I love that.
That's when I was like, I'm out.
That is a freak thing to do. That is freakazoid behavior.
But I think it's one thing if you earned that PhD, but it's another if they were like, yeah, here you go, you might as well. And then he was like, you know what, I'm taking this and I'm running with it. Dr. Franklin to you. Nobody
that goes by doctor outside of their job unless they're certifiably insane.
I think sometimes people put it on like their mail. This was his whole thing. The push and pull of Ben Franklin is he was like, no, humility is so important. No, nobody paid. And then he was like, it's the doctor to you. And then he would be like, no, you know, really, we should all live quiet lives. And he'd be like, off I go to France. Like he had this like push and pull relationship with like how much attention he was getting for being wise.
He's like a frat guy, like flexing during his speech and saying like, it's important to be humble.
You know that something I read said that described him as barrel-chested, and I was like, you don't really hear barrel-chested much anymore as a description of dudes.
What does that mean?
Like Jason Kelsey would be barrel-chested.
Like built like a refrigerator box?
Yeah, kind of. It was seen as more of a compliment. He was also almost 6 feet tall.
He was 6 feet tall. He had the most insane hair you've ever seen on a guy. He didn't have that hair
until he was in his 50s.
I don't care. He's on the $100 bill with half hair. So that's... He's on the $100 bill with half his hair. That's how everybody knows who he is.
The reason that he's on money and wasn't a president is because he was one of the first people to suggest that the colonies, like, all link up, which is something that I never really thought about when thinking about the 13 colonies, is that they were all operating as separate entities, basically. And he was like, we should have one governing body among the 13 colonies. And everyone else was kind of like, we already have a lot going on. We have our individual colony governments with like royal governors that have been appointed. Then we also have the British government. Why would we give ourselves another one? He was like, we will be more efficient. Our mail, which I am printing, will get delivered more easily. And so he originally suggested all of that and called it the Albany Plan, and it got shot down. But eventually later, when they did obviously all link up and start to form the United States, his thought process became useful. That is why he was cool. The reason he wasn't cool is because that winter, after suggesting that, he was 48. He went and stayed with his brother and started hitting on a young woman who was 23. Then that was Katie Ray. They kept up a correspondence for his entire life. Then he went to London again and started to stay with a woman named Margaret Stevenson. And then he started hitting on her daughter and talking to her. He was 51 and she was 18. And they also kept up a correspondence for his whole life.
So this is where he becomes hateable.
This is where he becomes kind of like a creepy older guy.
He does look creepy too. Are we going to ignore it?
No, we have not ignored it.
We can't ignore that he's ugly. There's no going around it.
He was known for being somebody who people were like kind of automatically rooting for. Like when he was young and he would show up in new cities, he would get help from people who were like, this seems like a really nice guy. And that charm carried with him when he went to France in his 70s is that it was the same type of ability to sort of like charm a room. But when you have that skill, it's hard to understand why other people might not be able to move through spaces with that much grace, or why other people might have friction.
How do you think his siblings reacted to his success? Do you think they were jealous, pissed off, confused, or not surprised?
He had like an ongoing beef with his older brother because he left him.
He was a brat. In the best way. It's good to know your worth.
Right. He's kind of the original Gen Z. Like, I'm out of here. I'm not getting appreciated enough.
Yeah, he was exactly like Gen Z.
You know who he'd be like the guy who does pitch decks to investors.
Yeah.
And is like, this is why you should give me a lot of money to start this company.
Yeah.
And he goes in with like 3 slides and a dream. That's Ben Franklin. His vibe,
because he thinks he knows
everything. In the 1700s was like 5 things that'll set you apart from your peers. Like 5 habits that successful CEOs do in order to make it. That was him vibe. Even then. That's what he would be doing now. It's like, yeah, have a protein shake every day with a raw egg.
Which is amazing for your skin, I bet. Those guys that are on Instagram and TikTok that preach that way, 99% of the time don't actually do what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They're good with words. They're somewhat attractive and they don't know what they're talking about at all. Mm-hmm. But if you say something with enough confidence,
well, that's
people will believe it.
He 100% would have been the kind of guy who to his partner was like, let's just go over the budget one more time. Or like he would insist on being an authorized user to his wife's credit card in 2025. Do you know have you ever seen those TikToks where couples are like budget night and it's them like in front of the TV and they go through the PowerPoint of like their financial plans for the year?
Nope, but your algorithm is crazy. That's crazy. My algorithm is dogs eating watermelon loudly. I'm not kidding.
Like, okay, babe, here's what I'm thinking for the year. I think there's a lot of public figures who are known for being incredible, like fatherly figures to the public, and then their own children would be like, he was never home. And he kind of had that relationship with his son.
Absolutely.
Where he and his son were estranged at different parts of their life. So much so that the son ended up being like a royalist who defended Britain. Royalist? Loyalist. Both, technically. He was appointed as a royal governor and then was like pro the crown all the way, even when Benjamin Franklin was very much on the side of the colonies. But Benjamin Franklin ended up having 2 kids. He and Deb had a daughter years after they had their son. And he showed up. Remember, he lived with this woman in England for years and years. He spent a lot of time in England and kind of like the center to the end of his life. So much so that out of his marriage, out of the last 17 years of their relationship, they were together in the same space for 2 of them. They spent all but 2 years out of 17 apart at the end of her life, Deborah's life.
That's sad.
It's crazy. And he spent a lot of it in London, and he was living with this woman, Mrs. Stevenson, and had this close intellectual relationship with her daughter. He missed his own son's wedding, which was in England. He went back to Philadelphia while his son was getting married in England. And then when his daughter was getting married in the States, he was also now he was in a different country, but he didn't miss Polly Stevenson's wedding. He walked her down the aisle.
That's so sad.
Isn't that insane? He didn't go to his own daughter's wedding, but he walked a girl who he was not related to and also kind of flirting with down the aisle. I bet he was super charming, though. Because to have gotten away with all of this, he had to have been unbelievably charming.
I think so, too. I think he must have been great with words, and he also must have been very, like I said, very persuasive, but he probably was able to, even for himself, give him reassurance and a reason for his action.
The most irredeemable thing about Ben Franklin is that his wife asked him to come home. Like, there wasn't 17 years in which she was like, yeah, okay, bye. It's that his wife, in her entire adult life, probably never spent one night outside of Philadelphia. She was always home. Okay. And meanwhile, he's like, all right, let's hit the seas.
Let's go flirt with some
flirt
French
overseas,
women.
Yeah, with some minors.
And had a weird fascination with prostitutes, and he developed relationships.
I think they were all fascinated by prostitutes. Like, who wasn't fascinated by prostitutes? You're telling me? They're like, yeah, you can have sex with me. No consequences. Sounds fascinating.
I feel like in college, he would have been like a total bro code Barney Stinson guy. Like, where he's just thinks it's cool to like meet a bunch of women and hook up with a bunch of women, and thinks it's cool to like have all these people on his speed dial and have like a roster.
I also think he would be the type of guy who wouldn't react well if you like confronted him about it, and he'd be like, what? I just respect your mind so much. Like, he'd have all of these women that he had deep conversations with until 1 a.m. And then when they were like, okay, so do you love me? He'd be like, no, what are you talking about? This is what I wanted to talk about with this episode.
Let's hear
it.
Is
the guy that flirts, and then if you're like, wait, sorry, is something happening? Is like, I have a girlfriend. Like, you know that. Like, what do you mean? Like, I have a girlfriend. And you're like, okay, that's weird because you've been hitting on me. And I'm not saying like that you would be the person being like, let's get together. But you're like, hey, there's a vibe here. And I've noticed, like, what are you talking about? I have a girlfriend. Because he actively did that with Katie, one of the first women who he met in Boston. And then he did it again throughout his life, where he would like tell his wife and then tell the girlfriend about his wife. And then when the women would flirt with him and be like, oh my God, it's so flattering to me that the brilliant Mr. Franklin, Dr. Franklin is talking to me, he'd be like, yes, and I've told my wife about our correspondence. Like, he'd like throw it in there just to remind them that technically he was with somebody. And that still prevails today. I think he would be a guy that like talks to you in the corner of a party and like touches your hand a lot, and then when you're to your friend, you're like, oh my God, so like, what's the deal with Brad? She's like, Brad is like getting engaged next month. And you'd be like, what?
It's crazy. Like, a few weeks ago, I hung out with a guy that I've always kind of been interested in, and we were talking for a minute, and it was absolutely such a romantic experience. He was flirting with me the whole time, the way he was talking to me and complimenting me, and the entire night we spent, like, we went for a walk, we went to dinner, we saw a movie.
Not the walk.
It felt like the best date ever. And then at the end, he was like, my girlfriend's coming to town in like a few weeks. And I was like,
huh? What?
Hello? I'm sorry, what?
Classic
Did you mean your sister? Did you mean your mom? I think you misspoke.
Yeah.
And guess what? They broke up. And guess what he did? He tried to actually hook up with me. So you know, it's true. That was the intention. He was interested. And if I were his girlfriend watching as a fly on the wall, I would be absolutely horrified by that.
Yeah.
This is such a type of guy. This is such a type of guy that is really common.
I once told a guy that I was dating that he couldn't line up the next people that he was going to date while I was dating him. And he was like, why not? And I was like, huh? I was like, don't do that while we're dating. Like, I can see you priming these like future romantic relationships, and I'm right here. And he was like, I think that's like okay to do while you're in a relationship. And I was like, no, it's not.
I kind of think he's right.
No, Analisa, come on.
I don't think you should do it when you're in a relationship. I don't think you should do it when you're in a relationship, but when you're single, you can keep one of your future, maybe we'll end up togethers, boyfriends, I guess.
Right.
You could keep somebody just in the back of your head, on the back burner, who's in a relationship. But I don't think if you're in a relationship, you should be thinking about that. That scares me, actually.
Dare I say, I think now might be the time to float your theory of the 4 boyfriends, because Ben Franklin was a man with at least 4 girlfriends and all fulfilling different purposes.
Okay. This is something I live by, I swear by, and it's necessary. And a lot of people in my life know about it. I think every girl in her 20s who's single, especially in LA, needs to have 4 boyfriends. And I am joking, obviously, not sort of. Real boyfriends.
Yeah.
By boyfriends, I mean men that you might marry someday, but right now you're chill about it.
Yeah.
Right now you don't really care. Right now you're not absolutely diehard in love with them, but you kind of have a crush on them, and you do think you could get married, and you definitely think you could fall in love with them if, you know, you wanted. And these boyfriends can be friends. They're usually friends. They could be ex-boyfriends. They could be in a relationship. They could be in a different state. And I think it's the most helpful when there are 2 dormant boyfriends, meaning you don't talk to them on a regular basis, but you know they're there in case the others piss you off. So, for example, they could live in New York, or they could live in Seattle or far away. I'm naming my exact boyfriends. They could live in another state. They could be in a relationship, and that's a dormant boyfriend. Active boyfriends means you talk to them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So that would be 2 friends or 2 guys that you kind of flirt with and have a will they, won't they situation with. But you don't really pursue it too hard because you're kind of focusing on yourself right now. So 4 boyfriends is important no matter what.
This is also different from the structure of a roster because these are all guys who are like important and in your life. Like these are not like dudes that you've gone on like a date with or dudes that are like passing through. These are like important male figures in your life who are like sort of all together supplying the role of boyfriend, but they each have a different part in it.
All 4 of these guys are going to be at your wedding. It's just which part are they going to be?
And they it's who's going to be the groom, and maybe one of them and maybe not.
I have 4 boyfriends and they all know about it.
Yeah,
they all know about
Analisa
this theory.
Analisa will use this as, she'll be like, oh, so-and-so, he's one of my 4 boyfriends.
It's true. They all know.
And to be clear,
they're all listening to this.
This is not polyamory, to be clear.
God, no.
Yeah.
God, no. This is not polyamory. This is not like there will never be an open relationship. That's not what I want to do. This is just 4 boyfriends that all know about each other. They all would be great friends if they knew each other, but there's no overlap between them. And they all have a very special place in my life, and they're all going to be at my wedding. We just don't know what part.
So there you have it, Analisa's theory of 4 boyfriends.
It's important, it's necessary, and it's the only way to survive as a single woman in this era.
You know what just occurred to me while you were talking about it, and this is back to Ben and Deb. 17 years apart, only being together for 2 out of 17 years last year. That's 17 like wedding or at least living together anniversaries he missed. That's 15 because there were 2 they spent together. 2 years they were together. 15 anniversaries, 15 birthdays. 15, like there are so many things he just missed.
Did people celebrate anniversaries in like the 1700s?
Oh, that's interesting.
Like how did they do it? Like I feel like a guy would come home, I got a duck for us. I got a live or dead, either for dinner or for a pet. Doesn't matter.
If a guy brought me a duck in 2025, I'd be thrilled. A live duck.
My grandparents grew up on a farm. Both of them did. And when they met, they were very young. And when they were first together, she was 17 and he was 19. And one of the ways he courted her was he got her a little piglet. And it was a gift. Here's a pig. So I don't know how else men were good boyfriends.
Bring back showing up with a pig. Because, like, at least if he's being a pain in the ass, you can be like, but he brought me a pig. He brought me Babe, the pig. You know, like, at least if a guy is being a jerk, you're like, well, he can provide livestock.
You know what's crazy?
What?
My grandfather was, like, the first Mexican vegetarian, but my grandmother...
Did she kill the pig?
She cooked.
No!
And he was horrified, and it was their first fight, too. He was like, this was a pet. And she was like, what? No, ew.
Oh, that's so sad.
And they were together for 70 years or something.
I would, if my partner cooked my pet pig, I'd never let go of it. Every fight, I'd be like, and you cooked my pig.
earlier today I was thinking Ben Franklin would be the type of guy on a date that would ask the most annoying creative questions. Like, you know, when you're on a date with a guy and he's like, oh, I want to be different and I hate small talk. So, like, what sea animal would you be in another life?
Yeah. Or
Shut up. I don't care.
You know what he
I
would
don't
do?
care about that kind of thing. I don't want to hear about it.
You know what
I don't
he
want
would
to know what
do
you'd be.
is he would be like, what's something you've always wondered?
Shut up.
And you'd be like, what? You know who he would be? You know who he would be? He would be the one who's like, well, like, I have a lot of female friends. I have a lot of, like, close female friends in my life. He'd be the guy with the girl best friend.
Oof.
And there would always be other women. And you'd be like, I think he likes me the most. But, like, apparently he has, like, a girlfriend from home, or, like, he's a high school girlfriend he was really close to. But, like, there's no way everybody else has, like, a bond like this. And then you'd find out that, like, no, everybody else has a bond like that. The thing about Ben Franklin, and historians will agree with us on this, is that his greatest strength was that he was a little bit duplicitous. Like, he would talk to whoever he was talking to would have a good impression of him. And he did have feuds. And
what does duplicitous mean?
Like two-faced.
Okay.
And he did have feuds. And I do think that, like, nobody was messier than founding fathers. Like, no Real Housewives can come close to the, like, feuds and spats that founding fathers were having and men at that time were having. And there was so much back and forth. But Ben Franklin, particularly as he got older, his whole thing was that he would be like, yes to the person who he was talking to, and he'd listen to them, and then he'd, like, coyly suggest something else. So he was really big on the Socratic method, where he'd ask you questions and kind of drag out, like, what he needs from you to be able to, like, apply that to the conversation. But this is what made him, like, the negotiator that the colonies sent back overseas to England and to France, because his whole thing was that he was somebody who could convince people. But he wasn't always pro colonies, because originally, when, like, he was kind of a middle of the road guy in a lot of ways. His whole thing was like, let's be practical, like, let's be careful about this. And so a lot of the Sons of Liberty were much, much younger than him. And so when they were like, bucket we ball, and they threw tea into the harbor, he was like, oh my God, why would you do that? The East India Company shareholders have done nothing wrong to you. This is something that we're taking up with the British government. And so he's the equivalent of the guys today when it comes to the, like, student protests and stuff, who would be like, well, now there's a time and a place for stuff like this. Or, like, there's no point, we shouldn't be destroying personal property while we're having. So he, like, he became more revolutionary, but originally he was kind of like, dare I say, like, kind of like Biden-y. He's the only founding father whose signature is on all 4 of the important documents for the founding of the United States. So the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, he's collecting them. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the peace treaty with England and France. That's those being 2 separate things.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm saying he would be a horrible first date. Like, I feel like, can you imagine going on a date with him? Like, what would he ask you? What would he talk about?
He'd be like, what's on your mind lately? And you'd be like, well, I was thinking, to be like, so what I've been thinking about is.
He would be like, what are you thinking about right now?
Oh, I got asked that recently, and I was like,
me too. You know what? I got asked that on a date. I was staring off into space, and he was like, what are you thinking about? And I was like, honestly, if 2 ninja bad guys broke into this bar, I would fight. Absolutely. I was thinking of what would happen if a fire broke out in this wine bar. How would I save all of us?
How you'd get
and
out.
Go viral about it on TikTok. Of course, that was what I was going on in my head.
That's
what else
never what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, like, either something that happened to me in 3rd grade, or, like, who I'll be in my 70s.
Oh no, I'm thinking about fighting bad guys 100% of the time.
Ben Franklin also was like, he spent his entire last 2 decades of his life being like, I'm probably going to die soon, and then lived to be 84. And so he spent all this time, but, like, I'm probably going to die soon. I know that I keep going back to Deborah, but she had a stroke and asked him to come home, and he didn't. And he kept being like, couple more months, babe, couple more months. So I'm just, like, really caught up at work, but, like, I'm coming. So he went in the winter.
He was cheating on her emotionally.
Yeah, he didn't have the need for her, but still. So she died alone. Well, like, without him, at least. Isn't that crazy?
That's
and
so
then
sad.
at his bedside was the woman half his age when they met, who he'd had a lifelong correspondence with. If I was in the afterlife and I fucking found out that at my husband's bedside was the girl he told me not to worry about after 60 years of back and forth, I'd be like, I would decide to be a ghost in that moment, and I'd be like, you're kidding.
Yeah, Benjamin.
He would die, and as soon as his soul left his body, I'd be like, it's me, we need to talk.
It's me, we need to talk.
And now you're stuck with me. We have eternity together to talk about you and her. How you swore there's nothing going on, and then look who was at your bedside.
She knew.
Yeah, she did know.
She was smart, too.
So he was an editor of the Declaration of Independence, obvi.
Oh, my God.
Duh.
Amazing. Good for him.
He was the person who decided on the word self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident. It was supposed to be longer. Jefferson's original sentence was like, we hold these truths to be this and this and this. And he was like, self-evident.
Was this guy on Adderall?
Like, I love that. I actually was going to say, I think Ben Franklin had ADHD, because look at how many different things he was doing and how much he thrived at being like in high pressure environments.
This is what unmedicated ADHD gets you.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, Ben
Capricorn
Franklin
with unmedicated ADHD.
Yeah.
Look what he did. I feel like he'd be like a big self-help advice bro.
Yeah.
Like, you know how those like extremely pseudo philosophical healers on Instagram just try and teach you how to be a person?
I think he'd have a YouTube channel, but he'd like pay somebody else to edit it. So he'd just like film for an hour a day, but then he'd like go really viral, but somebody else would be doing all the work.
We're going to do a little segment called You Know You're Dating a Benjamin Franklin. So you know you're dating a Benjamin Franklin if he writes you love letters and then he publishes them to show off what good of a writer he is.
He insists on splitting the check because it's revolutionary. Because he just respects you so much.
He flirts with you by critiquing your text structure, like the way you word text and your spelling and grammar.
He's somebody who would flirt with your friends in the name of radical honesty. Or he'd be like, you know, if I was single, I'd be really into your friend. And you'd be like, why is this information that's in my brain now?
He's the type of guy who'd be like, wow, she's so hot. You'd be like, hey. And he'd be like, what? We're supposed to be more honest with each other. That's what the therapist said.
Exactly.
The therapist said we have to be more honest with each other. And I'm just trying to be honest with you.
I think you would have been a guy that's like, I see you. I really see you. Because like these women were writing to him for decades. Like he had to have been really good at being able to be like, yeah, I'm listening. Like he had to have been so charming and funny, and they all were like, I'm so honored that I have the attention of Dr. Franklin. So like, I don't know why they're Southern suddenly, but I think he would be somebody though who would have his Substack or like newsletter on schedule send so that things post or send at like 5 o'clock in the morning, so it looks like he's up that early, because he was big into appearances. He was really big. He would like walk through the street carrying all of his newspapers, so people were like, oh, there's the printer. John Adams apparently found him really annoying because he kind of went by the whims of his like vibes. But keep in mind, when they were in France, Brenton Franklin is 30 years older than him and also has, we've decided, ADHD. So that's why he was like
John
that.
Adams I might have hit it off with.
What's your final verdict?
Would I date him?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you answer first? Would you date Ben Franklin?
I just punted to you.
Would I date Benjamin Franklin?
I don't think I'd appreciate the unsolicited advice. And also, like, I don't love the frugality stuff. I don't love him being like, the best thing about my wife is that she's such a hard worker and she spends no money. I'm like, the best thing about your wife is that she's thrifty. That's the best thing.
I'd rather date a Republican.
Also, clearly it's not the best thing because you're spending decades overseas away from her. So clearly, like, there are other things that matter more to you. I don't think I would have dated Ben Franklin. I think, though, that Ben Franklin sounds like he's very charming at a party. I think that, like, I would have found it interesting, and then I would have read some of his Substack articles, and I'd been like, I don't know, this is a lot of rules. He's like a guy who always says that he's, like, training for a marathon but never runs one.
Exactly. That's actually definitely a type of guy. I would not have dated him. I would have been embarrassed if he even tried to talk to me. I would be offended. I would be like, are you kidding me? Seriously.
But think about how much stuff he did. Like, he was impressive.
He did a lot of stuff, but if he tried to talk to me, I would be offended that he was talking to me.
The most impressive and, dare I say, hot thing about Ben Franklin is that he was like a self-made man. He was like an actual working class guy who like worked his way into being an important dude. And
but he was ugly.
That's impressive.
He was ugly. If he tried to hit on me, I would be offended he was even talking to me.
He was 6 feet tall.
That doesn't mean anything. He was ugly, annoying, and he probably smelled bad.
Okay.
And I would be embarrassed. I would absolutely just walk straight away.
They all smelled bad. You can't rule somebody out for smelling bad.
I would probably be single forever if I lived in that era because all of the men smelled bad.
I think that him trying to win everybody's favor, I don't think he was quite radical enough for me.
You can't.
I like Paul Revere. Let's get into Paul Revere in the future because like
we can't
riding on horseback, warning everybody. That's something I can get into. But Mr. like, no, don't ruin the tea. I'm like,
You can't keep changing the subject forever. You have to admit he was ugly.
I'm not going to.
You have to admit Benjamin Franklin was ugly.
Bad saying he was. You know,
you
those
feel
portraits.
Bad saying Benjamin Franklin was ugly.
I benefited a lot from orthodontia. You know what I mean? Like, if I had to get a painted portrait done of myself in the 1700s, I don't think I'd look that good.
If I had to get it, I'm sure it would have been better because it's a painted image of us. Yeah, they're portraying the best aspects of themselves.
Then why do they all look bad?
Because they were all so ugly. Men were so ugly. There was a male ugliness.
I'm talking about the women, though. Like, I don't think that the women looked great in that time.
There was an ugliness epidemic.
It's because they were all on the brink of death. Okay.
They were all had disease, mad cow disease. Ben Franklin looked like he had rickets, scurvy, all the pirates' diseases.
Okay.
He definitely was an Enlightenment fuckboy with a library card.
Well, there you have it. That's Ben Franklin, everybody.
That's Ben Franklin. Tune in for the next episode.
Can we say who the next episode is? We know who it's going to be.
Somebody really hot.
He is. No, you can't
somebody
be serious.
Somebody really hot.
That is somebody who I don't. Oh my God.
No, he's not hot at all.
Somebody really.
Another ugly guy. And next week on Dating History, the guy we're going to be talking about is another ugly guy. I'm Analisa, that's Katie.
It's Albert Einstein.
Next week, tune in for another ugly guy.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, now it doesn't matter if we say the name.
I whispered it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dating History. It's Katie here with the final fact check. At one point, we say to vaccinate against smallpox. Famously, smallpox was the first human disease ever completely wiped out, but that was after a massive global vaccination campaign. So vaccinate yourself and your kids, but not against that, because it doesn't exist anymore. Ben Franklin was very much an archetypal Capricorn. This is not so much a fact check, but just a public notice that the part of the wall that you can see behind Analisa has since been painted in entirety. Analisa at one point says the relationship between Ben and Deborah was a loveless marriage, which isn't necessarily true, but how much can you love someone if you haven't seen them in a decade? If your boyfriend is sending music over a prolonged text conversation, that is arguably worse than having sex with them. Just going over the facts here. We talk about how Ben Franklin missed 15 wedding anniversaries with Deborah. Celebrating wedding anniversaries was not a widespread practice in the way that we think of today, but still. Before Ben Franklin added his edit, the original drafted version of the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson was, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." William Franklin, Ben Franklin's son, who we describe as a child, was actually more like 21 years old during the time of the kite experiment. The exact date of the kite experiment is not known, but he definitely was not a little kid. Women did not go through menopause much, much earlier than they do now. It still would have been in their 40s or 50s. It says widely online that Ben Franklin is 5'9", but his biographer says he was almost 6 feet tall, so we are going to give it to him because that's like the historical equivalent of putting it on your Hinge profile. We don't really touch on this, but it's widely spread that Benjamin Franklin loved prostitutes in France. And while he did have several friendships or dalliances, there's no proof that he was sleeping with women in France or that he contracted any venereal diseases from them. I know that's not as juicy, but he still didn't go home when his wife had a stroke, so. In discussing the 4 major documents in the creation of the United States, I list the 4 documents as the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the peace treaties with England and France. The treaty with France was, in fact, not a peace treaty, but an alliance treaty, formalizing France's commitment to providing military and financial support against Great Britain. Going forward from this episode, we have a slightly more formal segment called Real Thing He Said. And while we touch on his letter of advice to a friend on his choice of a mistress, we are paraphrasing it. So I just thought that I'd read a quote from that. In that letter, he says, "So that covering all above with a basket and regarding only what is below the girdle, it is impossible of 2 women to know an old from a young one." Sage man. Thank you again for listening or watching this podcast. The hosts of this podcast are Analisa Burns and Katie Massey. You can find us at Dating History on Instagram. Our podcast is filmed by Alec DeLand with sound by Sam Lederman and audio assistance by Gus Binney. It's produced by Paige Freeman and Rookie Media. Our biggest source for this episode was the Walter Isaacson biography, Benjamin Franklin, An American Life. This episode was edited and fact-checked by Katie Massey. Special thank you to the Los Angeles Public Library and the Octavia Lab. Please let us know who you'd like to hear about in future episodes. You can send segment ideas and episode ideas to datinghistorypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Have a good week. And we'll see you back on September 10th when we cover Another Ugly Guy.